Well, just so you know, all schools across the country reopened on Monday, just in case you forgot, in case you didn't notice. This was after the closure of schools last year due to the coronavirus pandemic. So,
No, they closed because it was holiday time. They closed for Christmas.
among other things.
Okay.
So, today we take a look at compliance level to COVID-19 protocols in the first week of resumption, even in the middle of the second wave of the virus, which has caused so many countries to close down like 2 or 3 times on and on like that. So to have this conversation this morning, we have a lady and a gentleman. Ladies first, they say, so I have to follow your footsteps. Adetola Salau is Senior Special Assistant on Education to the Governor of Lagos State. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, thank you.
And we also have Chineye Mba-Uzoku, who is President, Institute of Software Practitioners of Nigeria, is a trustee, Education Reform Intervention Team, and member, Education and Manpower Thematic Work Group of the Federal Government's Agenda 2050. Great to know that we're
It's
thinking...
all education anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that we're even thinking that far, 2050.
2050.
Where the time they said that our population should be in the region of 400 million.
Well,
Oh,
remember in Babangida's time, it did restrict every family to 4 children.
that was
Okay, let's say it advised.
advised.
Yes, it advised.
Like the way China advised.
No, China didn't advise.
Oh, I'm just saying this.
No, China made it a law.
Okay.
It is not a law in Nigeria.
Okay, so
It is just an advice.
advice.
You do well to reduce your family to XYZ number.
And don't forget what Chief Obasanjo just said when he was in government. I can choose to take your advice or not.
Even though you are my advisor.
And you get paid for that. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Sorry, guys.
So let's begin with you, Mr. Lau. 1 week after, what are the lessons we've learned?
Well, as we know, education systems across the world continue to grapple with decisions to reopen, have in-person learning at schools. The thing is, I must emphasize the fact that school closures have had adverse impacts on child health,
Learning.
education, development, and the overall economy. So that's something we should keep in mind while we're having this discussion. However, the lessons that we've learned so far from reopening is a lot of schools have made substantial moves around strict hygiene and safety protocols, which we hope they continue to follow as we get into the second week. And then we're also emphasizing classes that have terminal exams, making sure that they are a priority because they have terminal exams. So we have to make sure that we prepare and we work with those students. We also are making sure that we emphasize mitigating transmission by having off and on days for learning and shorter time periods for learning. And another thing that we've been really working on is also shortening the curriculum so that we can have more, more of an impact on what the students learn so that when they get to those exams, there's more understanding, more engagement by the time they get there.
Well, there are some things they don't learn in school, which is one part of the reason a good number of people advocated that there should be in-person
learning.
In-person learning. The students should go to the schools, and that is a social interaction. You don't learn those ones at home and all of that. But to get that done, we have to stave off the interactions as much as possible. Was there any monitoring done to see how compliant the students were in maintaining social distancing? Was that possible?
Yes, it's been possible. We have quality assurance units which have been going out to schools. We've also had teams, and including those of us at our ministry here at Lagos State, going out for surprise visits to various schools to check them out. And even when I was here earlier, you had mentioned a school. We're following up on those schools to find out what happened and how to change that break.
So what did you find out at that intervention, that checking that you You said it. I didn't.
Yeah, some people have to make sure that more enforcement of those safety and hygiene protocols are followed. And the students also and the parents have to be also held accountable that, guys, this is what you need to do. You need to have your safety mask. Last term, when they first came back after the lockdown, we were giving them masks. But of course, that's not sustainable. So the students also have to take ownership by also, they are, particularly those in secondary school, they are old enough to be able to have their masks ready in the night or in the morning and bring them to school. Students who don't have them have to be sent back.
Well, Mr. Mbanzoku, this is Lagos, okay? And that is the example of Lagos. That's the Lagos report, so to speak, of how we have spent the last 1 week. I don't know if we can say the same thing for them in Bauchi, in Borno, in Burning KB, and so many other interior areas, even in certain interior Lagos. I don't know. What's your take?
It's a very difficult question to answer, very difficult question, because the data, first of all, is gathering the data is still in progress. I know that there are efforts to gather that data, but it's not yet collated. I would say on the average, a few things that just come to mind. First of all, I think the children tend to be more compliant than the adults. The children don't go to nightclubs. They don't organize parties. They don't. They don't do those kind. They don't go to markets. So if you get them to the school, they will do what they're told to do if they're properly instructed and guided. If you gamify the process, if they understand that it's part of a game, you kind of like turn it into a game for them that you have to keep your mask on. You find that the children teach each other. They will tell themselves, you're not wearing your mask, and it becomes a source of, there'll be lapses here and there, but I think on the average, children, the younger they are probably more compliant than the adults. So, and it's a big question. So then the shift then our concern should be more about, I think in some respects, and I mean it very seriously, that a lot of our concerns should be on the parents, on the adults. First of all, a child comes to school. So the government works to get the right kind of environment in the school. But who brings a child to school? How does a child come to school and how does the child go back? How does a teacher come to school and how does the teacher go back? If you're going to come to school as a teacher and you're inside a bus that is jam-packed and there's no compliance within the bus, and then you arrive at the school, it's almost impossible and unrealistic for us to ask the government to provide testing in the schools on such a regular basis to be able to monitor that. So I think the real onus for compliance actually lies with the adults. If we do what we need to do, then when the children get to school, there will be less of a burden on the schools themselves in order to provide that. And like I said, in behavior-wise, the children will do better. They will do better. You will see them telling each other, wear your mask. You're not wearing your mask. And it's like, there are little tussles back and forth because they are children. But they understand the importance of it and they will obey. It's people like you who decide not to obey.
Doesn't that also, put a responsibility on, I don't know how to put this, but perhaps this one way. There are still adults that the children go back to at home who don't believe that there is such a thing as COVID-19, who still do not believe even now. So, and they're going to interface, these children will interface with them when they get home and they go back to school and they are compelled to wear the masks. So that confusion is still there. So how will that kind of child be gamified?
It's actually, and that's the point I'm making, that the real change that has to happen, the real shift in attitude and behavior has to be with the adults. And if the adults don't do it, then why do you expect the children to do? They will copy what they see at a certain age. And if they see the laxity on the part of the adults, why would they do it? They will do it in school because they're compelled to. When they come home, they will do what everybody else is doing. When they're getting into the bus, they will do what everybody else is doing. You don't expect a 10-year-old and 8-year-old. In Nigeria, we don't have school busing. So that means that children come to school either by walking, they come on bikes, they come in private cars, or they come in buses, commercial buses. You don't expect a 10-year-old to tell the bus driver you're not wearing your mask. He's probably going to stand on the road. If he's lucky, he'll be probably thrown out. So I really think that to get this thing right, and we all have to take responsibility. And there's a lot of this pushing of responsibility to government. What is government doing? What's government not doing? But we haven't asked ourselves, what are we doing as individuals to create a safe environment and to embed the culture that the children can actually copy?
Okay, Mr. Salam, how are you implementing this social distance in school, in the classrooms?
Yes.
You're having staggered, you're having,
We're having
one
off
or
and
two
on.
sessions.
Yeah, we're having off and on. And I gave an example of that earlier this week when I was on, where we have, I'm going to give it that same example again, where, for example, we have junior and senior secondary schools. I'm using secondary schools because those are the ones I've inspected and seen students in classroom and interacted with them. So we went on a Wednesday, and that school that we went, well, those schools that we went to, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday were the days that JSS 1 were in school.
Okay.
And that meant that JSS 2 was not in school that Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They were on Tuesday and Thursday. So the classes that were occupied by JSS 2, we spread out the JSS 1 students into those classrooms, thereby implementing much more reach for the students to be able to utilize different rooms. And then we also insisted that the number of students in each classroom should be 25 to 30. And each school that we've been going to, wherever we see that they break this rule, we really come down hard on them on that.
25, 30, that's a large class.
25, 30 is actually when you space them out in those desks. It's not,
So how big are the classrooms in schools these days?
our classrooms are pretty big actually, for the most part.
Because my class, when I was in school, there were 25 of us for a full class. So if you're going to do one day off, so you have 15.
The standard classroom size
12,
is
15.
Yeah, the standard classroom size is about 40 seats. So, but some states like Lagos built a little bit larger to accommodate about 50 to 60 because of the number of people. Because remember, you have to remember that
60 children in one class.
well, it can accommodate that amount. I mean, in terms of it can accommodate that amount. But if you go to the schools, you'll find that there's a lot of spacing. Even back then, there was a lot of, before the pandemic, there was quite a bit of spacing. So clearly, they can accommodate that in many of the schools.
Again,
because the sizes of the school, of the classrooms.
Our classrooms are
you
pretty
need
big.
to,
Our classrooms are
and
big.
kind of like, Lagos is a bit peculiar, and we have to kind of like accommodate the fact that Lagos is peculiar. But I think if you go to other places outside of Lagos, you may actually find that they were not even able to fill up those classrooms of 40 to 50, 40 size. Some schools, some states, you find compact. Other states, you find a lot of space because of the ratio of children who actually do attend those schools.
So we have that challenge.
Yes,
There was a
challenge,
crisis
of
in
course,
education prior to the pandemic. The pandemic has only exacerbated it.
Has only shown us the gaps, as we were saying earlier.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, you are the president of the Institute of Software Practitioners. How busy have you been in light of the fact that a lot of learning has to be done from home now? Many schools have instituted online learning for their students and all that. So how busy has that kept you?
I would say not as busy as we should be.
Oh,
Yes, because
still?
Well, clearly, because there's a national conversation by some of the people who should be driving it, who are saying we cannot do it, and we keep coming back to this point that in every society, but more so in Nigeria, we've got these people that are the look back people, and we've got the look forward people. So the look back people will keep telling you, we can't. They're not talking about how can it be done. They say, we can't. And then they stand firm and say, we cannot. We will not open schools. We cannot teach because there's no equipment. There's no this, there's no that. The look forward people say, what can we do about it? So like in the case of Lagos, they went into radio. They introduced radio education by radio. They introduced education by WhatsApp. They introduced education by learning systems.
We also did TV.
They went and did TV. They worked on their teachers and their blended learning, as a pedagogy within the schools. They were looking forward. The look backs were saying, no, we're waiting. When it ends, we'll start. But no, we don't have infrastructure. And that's why I said that we've not been as busy. When you look at something like Zoom as an application, you find that Zoom's shares has gone up 700% since the pandemic began. Why? Because it was onboarded as a collaboration tool, not just in businesses or between individuals, but in schools as technology that enables remote learning. So we have seen some growth, but have we seen what we're supposed to see? Actually, no. And the real reason why we haven't seen that is because the government and the people of Nigeria have not committed to online learning. In many respects, they say it is inferior. So I asked the question, look at your WAEC results, your WASC results. May, June 2020 was the best result Nigeria has had in 5 years. in the pandemic. 80% of the people who took the exam got 5 subjects. 65% got 5 subjects, including English and math. It's the best result in 5 years. What happened? So when you go to the data, and the data shows you that, you start to ask yourself, you should be asking that question, what happened? Did we lower the standards? Or did you suddenly find that self-teaching by the students themselves? Did the students not get up and say, we've got this exam, we have to prepare for it? And they went out and they found materials to learn with. Many of them downloaded materials that came from our industry. Many of them, all the learning tools, examination preparation tools, all those things became possible for them. Those who didn't have borrowed from others, and they learnt. And they found a way, and they prepped themselves, because they went back into schools just 2 or 3 weeks before the exams. And they performed in this manner. So shouldn't we be saying to ourselves that we have seen something happen that is phenomenal? In the midst of a pandemic, which is the equivalent of a war, we have produced the best result. What was responsible for that?
We should therefore pursue.
We should double down on exactly that. And by doing so, every child in Nigeria should have a device. And every child should be able to,
and I was even going to interject that was what we did in Lagos State for both the junior, secondary, JSS3, and the SS3 students. We actually gave them devices. The SS3, we gave them simple smartphones, and then the JSS3, we gave them radios so that they could tune into the radio programming. And then we followed up with them on the simple smartphones, on their learning and with the content. And then their teachers were engaging with them on WhatsApp to follow up with them. So there was a lot of follow-up. And even after that, we went in person and we did surveys and we questioned them to understand what was happening and how engaged were they with their learning with those devices. We did that in Lagos State.
Well, it's interesting because the radio learning, to the best of my knowledge, from my experience, working in a previous broadcasting organization, radio learning started as far back as, say, 2000, 2002, thereabouts, in Lagos. So I'm wondering, maybe it was like Lagos decided, you know what, let's go into the future. But I think you were talking about a break right now?
Yes, we'll just take a short break, come back and continue the conversation. Thank you for staying with us. Now, during the break, we were talking about learning by radio, and we were wondering why stations would give the nation free airtime, because most of them are commercial stations. So, Ms. Salau.
Yes, I had mentioned during the break that it's because it's a social good and it does contribute towards development. And actually, this is one of those situations where we call it a win-win. It's a win for us as a state, as a public entity, but it's also a win for the private entity in that when we instituted the radio learning during the lockdown, we found out that the radio stations that partnered with us actually had an increase, a surge in listeners. And they were able to go back to the advertisers and say, look, we're having a lot more people listening in. And they're not just listening in Lagos. They're listening in from Ogun State. They're listening in from Katsina. They're listening in from Kaduna. They're listening from Cross River, from Akwa Ibom. All across the nation, we're going to increase our rates. And they were able to get more subscribers for those they advertised. And they made a lot more revenue during that time. So it's a win-win.
You probably got more tax from them. Mr. Balzoku, let me go back to what Alera said the other time about the fact that you should be busier now than you were before. It would suggest then that perhaps the naysayers had more authority, more ground, more say in the matter. What exactly is the inhibition? Because if you, of course, you are also part of that 2050 agenda of the federal government, if we have that kind of agenda on the plate, there really shouldn't be any reason why we are not talking futuristic. There shouldn't be any reason why we would have such naysayers having such a say in the stake.
Yeah.
Change is difficult, extremely difficult. I mean, we've been on this journey for a very long time. The digital transformation journey in Nigeria probably began with President Obasanjo. You would say when major things were done around technology. But, the understanding that there is a marriage between technology and education that is completely inevitable, and that you cannot drive one without the other is something that is still lacking. That's why people kind of like divorce the two. They talk about technology as a subject in school as opposed to a way of life. And so long as you proceed along those lines, you keep having these challenges. That, and predominantly, the predominant view is going to be that way. And I'll give you a couple of examples just for us to talk about that. The numbers always tell a story. Nigeria is 200 million people, between 180 and 200 million people. We have 1.8 million, maybe 1.9 million people in tertiary education. 1% of your population. Where is the human capital going to come from to drive the aspirations for national growth? If you don't dramatically expand the number of people going to school, getting a tertiary education, then there's no way that you can grow your economy, because the economy is built on people. Human beings and human capital is a fundamental component of what we would call your critical national infrastructure. So education actually should be treated as that. And technology is the only way that you can expand that. And the way to think about it is, you look at a university like University of Lagos. It's in the heart of Lagos. It has about 70,000 people, about 40,000 students, 30,000 academic staff. How do you expand it? How do we turn that number from 30,000 or 40,000 to 100,000 to drive the 21 million population or 24 million population of Lagos? You cannot physically expand the universities to the capacity that's required to reach the level that we need to drive, which means logically the only other way is to go to tertiary, is to go to use technology to grow the space. Beyond that, there's also a challenge around the world has moved on. Harvard University said last year, in the midst of the pandemic, that they're projecting that only 10% of the universities in the US will be in existence by the year 2030. In other words, in 10 years' time, that the pace at which technology is going, the demand for a reduced cost for tertiary education, the requirements for education that is non-physical, like engineering, medicine, and all that, will mean that there will be a radical shift. You're talking about over 600 institutions in the world's largest economy going away. Away as physical institutions and going to online. Not within 20 years, but within 10 years. We go into the other aspects of education. I just told you that our children produced dramatic results in the midst of a pandemic. We are in a war with this virus. And in that war situation, they task themselves. Parents task themselves. Teachers task themselves. The teachers going to calling up children, asking them how you're doing at home and things like that. What was the fundamental driver of that? And I would bet that when the data comes out, it's going to show clearly that those who deployed technology aggressively into the education sector are those that actually produce the results and produce growth. So there is no alternative to using technology. And unless we make a wholesale commitment, national commitment to it, it's not going to change.
Talking about the national commitment to it, what is the shortfall? What are the gaps? And then what are our low-hanging fruits? Because definitely, just as you have said, each time I look at this thing, I get as realistic. I try to get as realistic as you. 10 years from now, the 10-year-old is going to be 20 years old. And if these facts are in our faces, we definitely need to begin to do something. You heard David saying the other time that in 1999, he was barely 20, and now he's over 40. And the same thing we're going to say to the 10-year-old today, who is going to be 20 years old and of university age, or supposed to be out of university by age 20. What are the shortfalls? What are the gaps? And what are the low-hanging fruits?
So the way our industry sees things is that, technology is very unique. It is not just a catalyst. When you inject technology into an environment, it acts as a catalyst within that environment. It's also an accelerator. It forces things to happen much, much faster. And it's a multiplier in the sense that it doesn't just happen within this space. It has complementary effects across. It's the only thing in this world that actually has those three characteristics. The ability to catalyze change, ability to accelerate the pace of change, and the ability to multiply change across sectors. So the more you restrict technology, the more of a disadvantage you put your own society at. And the truth is that, what do we need to do? There are basic things. This country, for instance, should do. I often give the example of India. India made a decision that they were not going to allow, they were going to preempt the purchase of iPads at $400 a piece. They have a population of 1 billion. And they said if 1 million of our people buy iPads, that's $400 million that is leaving our country and going to Apple in the US or wherever it may be. And they said, we will build our own. They had sat down with the engineers, they designed it, they put a cost to producing it, and they said, well, it's going to be cheaper for us to produce this in China. So they outsourced the manufacturing to China to produce the device. The device came back into their country at the cost of $60. And the government then said, yes, and the government then said, we will make this device available to all tertiary institutions at 50% of this cost.
$30.
Yeah. That device has gone through 4 iterations today. Where it is now, it's as good as any Android tablet you can get anywhere else. But it's now manufactured by Indian companies, partly in China, partly in India, and they've reached proliferation.
Okay.
With the device, once you put a device, and all of us here are witnesses to that, and our parents are witnesses to it. If an 80-year-old lady can get a handset that is a smartphone and learn how to manipulate it, no instruction manual. I don't know if you ever read the instruction manual for your smartphone. My mother didn't, and she's 84, but she uses it. This is the magic of the device. So today, she's got access to exactly the same set of tools and capability that anybody else on the planet has who has the same phone. This is the power of what we must bring. And then the multiplier then happens. Our industry then takes it over. We start, instead of our children consuming content that comes from abroad, they consume content that's made in Nigeria. Instead of our teachers trying to publish to Google Scholar, they publish locally, and a teacher I can be a mathematics teacher in Lagos, and I'm the best mathematics teacher in Nigeria. Maybe even one of the best in Africa. I teach, I codify that learning, I make it available digitally, and people from South Africa are paying me to watch my video.
Then it can be translated into local languages.
It turns into money.
And that's what we're doing.
This
that's
is the
what
multiplier.
We're doing that in Lagos
This is
State.
the
Are you
multiplier.
also buying? Are you also making the devices in Lagos?
Don't go to
I'm
the
just-
device
No,
yet.
I actually want to talk about the devices. I really do. They're really important, and we spent a huge drive. We had a huge drive in 2020, which was supported by, I guess, can I mention the names of the people who supported us?
Some people.
Okay,
just go
some.
on.
Okay, at least let me stop with First Bank. First Bank was one of our major drivers for those simple smartphones that we gave to our students, and we gave it to them for free. So we did have those drivers, and that's what helped us with our WAEC, because we gave it to our SS3 students. And this year we have...
Are they given to them to take away, or when they leave it for the
Oh
next
no, they
set of
take it home,
students?
because we have hybrid
No, when
learning now.
when they graduate.
Or when
in
they
quotes,
graduate,
yes,
What are they
they
owned
leave it for the
like
next
What's going
set
to
of
happen with them?
students.
Well, right now, we are thinking in terms of while they're in school. This set that we have right now, by the time we get to the end of their tenure in school, we'll make that decision. But right now, we're working on while they're in school. For now, we've given out devices to SS2 and SS3 students. We want to get it all the way down to SS1 and eventually our junior secondary schools. So we have a major drive this year where we want to have more devices. So we have a dedicated line in the budget for the purchase of more devices, as well as we're going to continue this drive to reach out to the private sector to partner with us so that we can give out these devices to our students, both in public and private schools. Because it's really important if all our students have these devices and they're able to engage in blended learning. See, the key thing that I'm getting from what he said, and we have also studied and seen, is when the students have agency, that is, they have the ability to take ownership of their learning, something magical happens. And we saw that when we went out and we surveyed them and we spoke to them and we engaged with them. What did you do during the lockdown? How are you learning? What were you doing? What were your parents doing? And these were our students in the public sector that we were interviewing and talking with. I'm sure if we went and we also interviewed our students in the private sector, we'll hear the same thing
Exactly.
too.
Any
And
interactions
what's-
with our own Silicon Valley in Yaba?
Yes,
a
we've
lot.
been engaging
the
them.
The content that sits on those devices
Yes, it's
is
from them.
local
It's
content.
local content.
And
Yes,
this is
it is.
this is exactly
Yes,
what should
it
happen.
is.
So
It
think
is.
about proliferation of these local contents, that
Yes.
people all over Nigeria, software
100%
developers
Nigerian.
can build
Yes.
software. Teachers can create content. Everybody can utilize
Our
that
teachers
platform
recorded their own videos.
and accelerate.
What would you
Created
recommend?
podcasts.
My apologies, because I know I can't answer for
This
her.
is
but
getting very exciting.
I'm almost certain I know
Yes.
where she's like this. But if we are to catalyze this Lagos example that you're talking about now, all over the nation, what will it take? What's the challenge? What's the drop down?
I'll tell you, it's not a difficult thing. I said it earlier. There's a look back and a look forward people. Let's not forget that.
Do you need a national policy?
We need the look forward people. And I'll tell you why.
Do you need a national policy? My apologies.
Yeah.
Do you need a national policy for that, or it's just something that the governors themselves should be able to pick it up?
When you want to move a nation, you create a moonshot. We're going to put a man on the moon. We're going to put fiber in every home. I mean, you create a moonshot. We're going to put a device in every hand. It becomes a national mantra, and everybody starts to move towards that goal. Until that goal is set in such a big, audacious manner, it will not move. Software developers across the country are literally desperate, not just for work, but to be agents of change. They have the capacity. They have built learning management systems. They have built learning content creation systems. They've built content delivery systems. They are working in the networks, in all the telcos. They are there. The entire technology industry, and particularly the software industry, which I represent, they have done this. Lagos State is using software that was locally developed. They didn't go and buy applications from America or from India or whatever. They're using tools that were locally developed, which means that we've generated employment. What does it take? It takes a simple statement and a real commitment that we, as a country, are going to move 60% of our education online within the next 10 years. And immediately, the entire system starts to operate around that and says, how do we make that happen?
Should start moving in that direction.
All the little steps.
It should start, but I think it's very important for us to understand that there's a momentum that has already happened. And it happened a long time ago, but sometimes the data is not available to us. The tertiary institution with the highest number of Nigerians is Indira Gandhi National Open University. It has the largest enrollment of Nigerians of any university in the world, including in Nigeria.
And it's all online.
Yes. 4 years ago, it was 600,000 Nigerian students who were enrolled in Indira Gandhi National Open University. That's one university.
600,000.
Yes.
Okay.
So you need to ask yourself, how do we accelerate that process? And by contrast, that 600,000, remember what I said, the total population of our universities today, student enrollment, is about 1.8, 1.9 million. That's across 164 universities.
Interesting.
Okay.
You wanted to?
Yes. Now, we've spoken about the students, we've spoken about the learning. Now, let's talk about the teachers.
Thank you.
Yes.
What kind of training are the teachers getting to be able to keep up with this trend now?
Oh, yes. We have been very, very aggressive working on that. We have partnered with Microsoft, one company, as well as other organizations to onboard a lot of learning to accelerate the teachers being able to utilize technology as a tool. I agree with him. Technology is a wonderful tool if utilized properly. So we partnered with Microsoft and other organizations to start working with our teachers. During the lockdown, we trained over a week's period, 18,000 of our secondary school teachers, being able to use different software to engage the students actively.
Keep going.
Okay, yes, being able to engage the students actively and be able to utilize blended learning. That was what we did. And we're continuing to do that throughout 2021. In fact, we have several iterations, several plans in the works.
If you don't mind me butting in here, the question I believe that she's trying to ask, or has asked you, let me put in a few other words. So there are teachers that have certain skill sets about impacting learning. Now we have to move, to use Mr. Bazoku's word, 60% of that into the virtual space. Mm-hmm. The skills are different.
Of course.
So have you had to take on new set of people to impart this learning, or is it the same number of teachers?
It's the same teachers, and we're working with them. They are being trained with these organizations that I mentioned and these training programs that we started in 2020, and we're going to continue even more aggressively in 2021. Because like we all know, whether we like it or not, this is the new normal, and we've embraced it in Lagos State because we're continuing blended learning. So we do know that the way you engage in-person learning is totally different from the way you engage learning online. Okay. So that's why we're making these active measures to make sure that we're able to utilize, I won't use the word utilize, boost the teachers, their skills in being able to deploy this online learning properly.
Okay. He talked about something interesting, and that is change is always difficult. I want to assume that there was a little bit of resistance from the teachers, initially. What were their reservations, and how was it addressed?
A lot of their reservations, of course, were, do we have enough devices for the students, which we've assured them of this drive that we are to getting more devices for the students. Another one, of course, is about data, which we all understand. But the way we've come around the issue with data is these devices, we've made a lot of the content available offline. So you don't actually require data to be able to get on. And then we've been trying to, I say trying because we're still in the works, to partner with the telecos to give us reduced tariffs, reduced rates for our students to be able to go online when they do need to go online with those simple smartphones.
Well,
the issue of data is an issue which we always raise when we talk about this e-learning thing. What kinds of conversations are going on with the telcos, and not just the telcos, those who actually are giving internet infrastructure? People like Main One and all that, Fiber One, NG1, or whatever they're all called.
So it's a little bit of a touch and go. The reality. I mean, you must have heard some people talking about many governors announcing right of way, cancelling right of way charges, and all that sort of thing, which is to facilitate the deployment of that kind of infrastructure. I think we have to understand that there's a maturity model for these things. You go from one stage to another stage, and you keep going that direction. The truth is that for learning to happen, about 80% of that learning does not require, if not more, at most levels of education, does not require the internet.
Does not require?
Internet connectivity.
Really?
Yeah.
But if I'm a student of Indira Gandhi University?
They're doing, this is what I'm saying, that the students have chosen that option, right? Because that's the way that they have to go. The question is, can we provide an alternative? And what you'd find is that, just like in this office, you now want to send an email. If I want to send an email to you, sitting right here, I would connect through my device to my provider, through my GSM company, we'll connect to the mast, and it goes up into the cloud. It goes to a server outside of Nigeria, travels to find your address, and sends the information back to you, and you have to be connected to the internet. In other words, an email from me to you, first of all, takes a trip, an international journey. It's completely unnecessary. Why can't it go from me directly to you? This is what we mean by going into the offline mode, the connected but offline in terms of not online to the internet. If I put a server in this room and you can connect to it using a simple router, no internet, and you're all my students, you will learn. Because I will download all the content that is required onto that server and put that server in a school, create a local area network using a router, no internet, and whatever sits on that server, every student in that school will get access to it.
So in a way,
that's an easy way for us to take all the education, because a lot of this content is free. But even the one that has been created, you can interact inside. The internet has not always been here.
So this will perhaps
let's understand each other.
This will perhaps address one of the challenges that I believe Mr. Lau mentioned earlier, because once students are able to get on the internet, they go to other areas of the internet.
All other places.
They can, and they can
Our
also.
devices are restricted.
They can, but they can be stopped, because you can
devices
restrict them through software. The software can restrict them to
we have
certain
restricted
locations. Even the connection can restrict them to certain places. So you can have, in the old days, we used to have what we call the ISM band, which was a frequency that was restricted for education, the military, and research science.
Okay.
So it is possible for you to restrict it. So I do think that it's very important for us to understand that if I go to my village today and I take your device to my village today and I can connect it to a projector, everything that you have on that device becomes available to all the children in that school. No internet, just a projector and your device. And immediately I can teach global warming, because every video you have there, I can project and I can teach with. More importantly, Tola is an expert in STEM. if I have recorded Tola's lessons for a complete term of curriculum, and it's on your device, it means that suddenly my village is having access to Nigeria's best teacher of STEM. It really is as simple as that. We are the ones standing in our own way, and we just need to get out of the way and let things happen.
I want to interject that actually we're having partnerships because it's present continuous. We're having partnerships with a lot of these organizations about internet in the building. In fact, we're going to be announcing very soon some of the work we're doing with Facebook around internet and access for our students. And it's not just Facebook, there are others. There are going to be more announcements around that coming up before the end of the first quarter, if I remember correctly. Yes, before the end of the first quarter, because access is actually very important. I mean, yes, we do have this content offline. However, we do want them to have access to material that also will make them globally, being able to have what is out there, across the world. There's so much material, particularly in the sciences, that have been done there that if our students take advantage of that, they are world class.
Okay.
They'll be able to compete with anyone.
Well, let me read this tweet. If a student suddenly started to show symptoms of COVID, how would the school deal with that?
We have sick bays in our schools. Like I said, we've been going on COVID readiness tours, visits across our schools, and we've ensured that each of these schools that we go to have those sick bays. So immediately any student shows that student is isolated in there, and then we begin to deploy other safety measures around containing and then evacuating the student from school. So we do have sick bays in each of our schools. I have seen them. We have interacted with the medical personnel who are also equipped to be able to handle the students in those places. So yes.
Okay. Waleski says the plan they put in place to put the private schools in check. Your focus seems to be on the public schools.
Oh no, our jurisdiction is both public and private schools. So when I'm speaking here, I mean, yes, I am speaking about public schools. We have also visited our private schools and seen what is going on. We have safety and hygiene protocols put in place for our private schools. So we do address both our public and private schools. In fact, like I mentioned on Tuesday, majority of our schools here in Lagos State are private schools. So of course we have to address and handle whatever things that are going on in there too.
Festus Akimboyewa again says, are there fully trained school personnel who can identify the symptoms of COVID, and do they have the skills to deal with them?
Yes, we have had sensitization trainings the third and the fourth quarter by the states, by our agencies who are equipping and dealing with head of schools, teachers, this same medical personnel I mentioned, that's the nurses, as well as the teachers who are dealing with the students in class. Yes, we've had really, really robust trainings around that.
There's this other one that goes with one of us here. Every disappointment comes with a lesson. The e-learning could be traced back to the 60s. Some of my subjects, his or her subjects, like natural science and so on, were delivered via the NTV between 11 a.m. and 12 noon, when there was nothing like TV programs at daytime.
I said it.
Yeah, you did. Okay.
We're not in the 60s
So
any longer.
We're not ancient.
No, maybe old. See, people need to understand that life is cyclical. What's old becomes new again. What's new becomes old.
Let me take this on with you, Madam Salasala. You have heard him talk about us looking forward.
Of course.
Now, in terms of looking forward, some of these devices were probably imported. I stand to be corrected. But he has also given an example that perhaps, we might also be looking at. If one is to channel this, because it is an opportunity for us to develop a lot of
learning,
capacity
building,
and futuristic ones. What are the opportunities that Lagos State government, for example, has seen? And what are the things we're doing to make sure we do not lose the advantages these opportunities have brought?
I can say it in one word, skill development.
That's in closing.
Yes, skills development. We're taking advantage of skills development. We're making sure that we're putting in place ways that we can build and boost the capacity of our youth. And we're going to be rolling out different programs around this. So yes, skills development in the word, that's what we've been working on. That's what we've seen exposed by the shortages with the pandemic,
Okay.
and then we want to make sure that, okay, we've seen this, how do we make sure that we anticipate that this doesn't happen again?
Okay. In the event, in a few words, Mr. Mbazoko, in the event we do not take sufficient or significant advantage of these opportunities, what are the risks?
We're already seeing the risks because a large part of the insurrection that is happening in the northeastern parts of the country is coming from education. It's a simple story. I mean, it's the story, a lack of education, because it's, I mean, the Boko Haram thing is all around education. It's about, does education deliver employment? And if we do go to this type of school, will we actually get something? When you look at what is happening across the country, the insecurity that we're seeing, and even in Lagos, the insecurity is as a direct result of two things: education, jobs and opportunity that derives from that. Once you close one down, you cause the other. And we continue to maintain, and I can't say this often enough, I know it sounds very self-serving, but the truth is that in the 21st century, we have no option but to go digital. And every day that we sit saying we can't, looking back, takes us away from a possible
I think we
future.
all come to acknowledge that.
Thank you very much.
Digital is the way to go.
Absolutely. I want to thank you both for being here this morning. Adetola Salau is Senior Special Assistant on Education to the Governor of Lagos State. Thank you so much for your time. As well as Chineye Mbazoko, who is President, Institute of Software Practitioners of Nigeria, a trustee, Education Reform Intervention Team, ERIT, as well as member Education and Manpower Thematic Work Group of the Federal Government Agenda 2050. Thank you once again for being here.
Thank you very much for having us.